Welcome to the session. As was indicated, I work at the Western European head office. Western Europe, in Microsoft terms, isn't Western Europe in anybody else's terms because it doesn't include the United Kingdom, France, or Germany. So essentially, it's a very unusual construct. And for those of you who are politically aware, it does include Ireland, and it includes the north of Ireland and the south part of Ireland together. As you can imagine, in Northern Ireland, when I come and tell them I've actually come from the Dublin office to look after them, some people get quite upset about it. So, this afternoon I'm going to talk to you about how you get rapid value on your SharePoint environments when you add in Project Server, and how you can use it very simply to take control of your SharePoint environment. So some of this is going to be sort of business focused, IT prototype focused, and towards the end we'll be looking at some of the technology that we're using to build it. And what Mons is doing for me right now is reconnecting to our demo server in the Schista office, where we were hosting the demo from. I would guess that all of you are using SharePoint to a greater or lesser extent, and we know that when we use SharePoint, there often is a proliferation of sites being created. But the reality is, SharePoint sites vary dramatically from those very simple self-provisioned sites to the highly customized, highly complex environments. And they basically go through the full gamut from A all the way through to Z. So how do you manage them? How do you control their life cycle? How do you decide whether or not applying a patch is going to have almost no impact, or is going to potentially have massive impact? And how do you control that from a risk perspective? We'll then have a look at how we've used Project Server as a way of using the capability inside that environment to take control of those more complex end of the maturity of our SharePoint deployments. And then, of course, because this is a Tech Day presentation, at the end of the slides, there's a whole bunch of resources, including links to the solution that I'll be showing you later on, as long as Mons is doing his job perfectly over here. He's looking for things now, yes. Right. Why do people choose SharePoint? Unfortunately, I'm very old. And I go back to a time when collaboration meant email. In fact, before there was email, in fact, it's a bit sad if I look back to the very first deck of punch cards that I carried across to the computer all those many, many years ago. But collaboration came very quickly into our lexicon of concepts. And over the years, we have driven onwards and onwards and onwards to try and improve our collaborative experience. And SharePoint is a fantastically capable platform for doing that. And once you've got content in that sort of environment, the ability to find that content easily is one of the massive added values. And even within Microsoft, sometimes the things that I find very frustrating is that we forget what we know. Often we find ourselves reinventing stuff because we don't actually use our own technology, in honesty, as well as we could do, to refine the things that we've done last year that are almost the same as the things that we could do this year. And we need to train people to actually use these things. Document management, obviously, is something that's been with SharePoint right from the earliest days. And obviously the integration with the Office products has become better and better. But again, in order to take advantage of it, we need to have some structure around it. And one of the great things about using the workflow and the capability of the EPM server is that the whole document management piece is just a native part of the process. BI. BI is one of the more recent additions. We're using it every day with SharePoint. Again, our EPM servers, because they're built on SQL, can take advantage of any of the BI tooling that we offer you through the SharePoint platform. Workflow, well, that's a fundamental part of what we're going to be looking at, and a fundamental part of things that you are doing with your SharePoint environments at the moment, I would suspect. And before I joined Microsoft and I was a consultant, one of the things that one of my colleagues said to me was, look for the forms. When you're going into a company, any of you who can walk around your organization, and if you can find cupboards with forms in them that people are using, these are fantastic opportunities to move those into a SharePoint environment. The cost savings, when you actually look at what you can achieve by moving forms from a paper-based forms into electronic-based forms, and then the analysis and the reduction in printing costs, storage costs, the amount of time people spend trying to data mine this piece of information are remarkable. And it's amazing how much paper is still out there. Oh, you took my mouse, you swine. And the beauty of it is that now we've got great templates that people can take from SharePoint and get started really, really easily. And now all this stuff you know already. I'm not telling you stuff here that you don't know. And people are becoming just focused on things that they can do with SharePoint, but the outcome of this is we just get more and more and more of these applications. And it's actually quite hard to keep it under control. We look in terms of sort of the way that these things break down into things that we can do on a self-service basis. Things that we as IT guys don't really want to get involved with unless we absolutely have to. And here is a list of the sort of things that we're talking about. Stuff that you will recognize, and stuff that I do. I mean, I'm no SharePoint guru. Let me be the first to stand up for that. But I will go in and I'll do some basic customization of sites that we use internally. We'll create sites and we do all sorts of bits and pieces. And it's really quite remarkable what you can do if you've got even a slightest bit of power user capability. Typically, we're looking at things that might take minutes or hours, and it's often, as I said, self-service. The user can do it or can do it with a minimum of help from IT. However, then we start to go things which take more effort. They take a real amount of time. Typically, restoring deleted sites. Why would we want to do that? Well, users being what they are, they forget that these things have to get archived at some point in time. Maybe installing third-party software. We want to put it through some sort of staging environment to check that it's not going to do anything majorly damage to our main site, or deploy some sort of custom solution. And typically we look at these things that are going to take, I would say, not so much hours, but days or weeks in terms of elapsed time. They may not take weeks worth of man effort, but they'll have to go through various cycles which over a period of time will amount to something considerable from the idea through to the execution. And then we look at major upgrades. Whether it's major upgrades to the platform, adding in of some significantly new features, maybe connecting it through to some complex external sources with complex workflows, building some very customized environments for particular business needs. And these typically will be weeks or months worth of duration. Again, the effort will vary very much according to the different type of project. But it's all SharePoint. It's all part of SharePoint. And actually taking control of that is remarkably difficult. Coming from an EPM environment, one of the things that I find sometimes a bit depressing is the lack of attention that's given in some environments, and I'm not accusing any of you of this, of course, of not having staging environments, not having places there are safe sandboxes to go and test stuff. They go straight into production, and then people start to say, well, it's not working properly. Well, where did you test it? No, we put it on our production server straight away. And you say, well, it's not exactly best practice, and it hasn't been the best practice for the last 50 years. Why would you start doing that now? Why would we treat these things with less respect than we have treated other systems in the past? So actually, making changes and putting them through proper control processes is can be quite challenging. How do I, one of the things that struck me about SharePoint is that there is a very fine balance between the time that a user says, oh, I can do this myself, because they think they've got sufficient skills within the SharePoint environment to do it, to the time they realize they've just bitten off a little bit more than they can chew, and they actually need IT's involvement to help them take it to the level of completion that they need. And that, immediately that happens, you're going from an expectation of something happening very quickly to something by necessity that has to fit in to your overall business workloads. And then the users have to go through some sort of process, and not by jumping up and down and banging their fists on the table, but you want to take them through some sort of process that allows them to say, okay, you want to make a change, here's the process that you go through. When we get to the bigger amounts of effort, IT departments have a finite resource. Interestingly enough, when I showed this to the International Atomic Energy Authority, I like to drop names from time to time, in Vienna, when they looked at it, they said, this is just a fantastic way to manage our backlog. Not from the point of view that they didn't know what their backlog was, but to actually show their users the amount of competing requests that were coming in. And that they had a finite amount of resource, and that they had a backlog of 100 odd projects, big and small, and people didn't realize that you just put your projects in there, you can ask for things, but there are other things in there that might have to be prioritized ahead of them. And there was no visibility of that. And their users just became very frustrated, and they immediately saw the value of deploying this. And of course, it all takes time, it takes people's time, it takes maybe contractors' time, there may be costs of third-party software, or some sort of additional bandwidth or server capacity, whatever it happens to be. There is a cost. And again, often the users don't really understand what those costs are going to be. Some projects, 3 lines. Some projects, 33 lines. Some projects, 330 lines. It doesn't, there is no one size fits all here. The complexity of what you're doing is, will vary dramatically. But the reality is, you need to have the tools and the standardized way of doing things to be efficient. If you don't do things on a repetitive basis, what happens is, people start taking the wrong turn, they don't learn from previous mistakes, you can't reutilize best practice. And then at the end of the day, how well did we do? The question that very few of us actually answer. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of you've ever heard of psychometric testing. I'm sure you've all heard of psychometric testing. And the one that most people know is a thing called Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is quite a cool thing, but there is some other competing psychometric testing, and one of them is called Belbin, after Professor Belbin. And he defines the sorts of people that goes into teams. It's a great way to analyze your teams. And you have things like chairman, and you have things like designer, and various other things that people show their attributes for. But there's one particular type, which I think we don't have enough of in IT, and that's called a completer finisher. So many of our projects never quite get to the end. We don't really sign them off in a way that we want to do. We don't get the users to sign them off and actually say, yep, actually, that met my requirements. We sort of say, here it is, and I hope that they're not going to come back to us and ask us difficult questions in 2 weeks' time. And actually, finishing things is really, really important, because otherwise, how can you really judge yourself? The fact that you think you finished doesn't mean to say you really have. And if your internal customers, aren't entirely satisfied, actually that's a problem, and you just don't know about it. So self-service, we want to encourage people to look after themselves. We don't really need to get involved with this too much. It should have a governance model, but most people, we let them get on with it. In Microsoft, you want to create a SharePoint site, go do it. We will, unless you specify specifically, it will get deleted after a year automatically. When we get to minor requests, we start to get into a situation where we need to do some review as part of the process. So that's really rather important. And if we've got a lot coming in, how do we prioritize them? And when we get to the more major projects, then the whole process is, we start to move into something that is my background and the things that we're talking about, the full sort of life cycle of a project environment, where we do a planning, a managing, a deployment, and sort of some sort of phase, support phase, and we should be going through the classic loops around this. So when we have a backlog of projects, and most of us will have, we need to be able to have some sort of objective process to decide which ones we're going to do. How do they prioritize? Now, whether or not you can do that will, to some extent, depend on your maturity. But the great thing about using Project Server on top of the SharePoint environment with this particular issue is that we can start to really start to show some significant business benefits. We can help people really categorize their products, their changes that they're asking for. Is this going to deliver productivity? Is this going to deliver some high risk in the change? Is it going to affect our ability on our product side to actually come to market? There are many other criteria you may wish to use. And I like to use stories to illustrate this, and frankly, it's not a SharePoint story, but it's a similar sort of situation where I worked on a project for British Airways quite a few years ago. And it was a collaborative project, and it was about people asking for changes of planes to go on different routes. And they did that because maybe the Olympics were on or something that was going to go on. They felt there'd be more people going on it. But if you imagine if you're an airline and you've got a 757 on a route, and then you decide you want to put a 747 on that route, you've got crew issues, you've got flight crew, you've got catering issues, you've got ground handling issues. It doesn't take a lot to think about all the different people that are affected, and these are all different departments. And a year after we deployed this, I saw the guy who was the sponsor for the project, and I said to him, so how did it go? He said, we saved £5 million in the first year. I said, that's fantastic. How many changes did you make as a result of it? We did less changes. Because we realized when we got to people to collaborate together that the changes that people were asking for were costing more money than the revenue that they were generating. And it's only when you get these sorts of questions being asked and you get people working together that you start to see those sort of real and actually quite simple benefits. So if we're going to do a project, for whatever reason, we want to keep our project content together. We want to ensure that the people who are involved in the project know what it is they need to do and when they need to do it. And we need to know what the impact's going to be if things start to slip. Things never slip, of course. And it would be nice from an IT management point of view to have some sort of overview. So, we believe that I'm sure all of you have realized, this isn't just for SharePoint. This is true for any application. We build it around SharePoint, otherwise I wouldn't get a slot here at the conference. But the reality is it could be for anything at all. I didn't say that. So here is the way we've visualized it. Typically, on these more major type projects, we need the users to say, we need a change. This is what it is. Medium-sized, large-sized change. We need to rank the changes against each other in terms of business benefit, in terms of cost, in terms of resource utilization. Once we've agreed that the ones that we wish to go ahead with, we need to ensure that we have enough resources, people, things, whatever it is that we're going to use to actually make this happen. We need to do it after having planned it. We need to execute it. We need to control that execution to make sure that it is happening according to the plan. And of course, let's actually check that we've finished it to everybody's satisfaction. So, the reality is, simple requests. If you're not a terribly mature organization, well, you can just make some forms in SharePoint and store them in a repository. You don't need Project Server. I'm not saying you need them for all of these. It may be just a simple list that you control. Why not? It will at least capture all those requests. So this isn't, I'm not saying this is a solution for everybody. We can use, on a as needed basis, the project professional client. And the beauty of the project professional client, and some of you may use it, some of you may not, is that with Project Professional, you can sync your projects onto SharePoint, and that's SharePoint Standard or SharePoint Enterprise. And that means that a professional project planner can do all the things that he wants to do, but he can share it with the team in the SharePoint environment. They don't have to have projects installed. And it gives them the ability to do some simple updating straight into SharePoint. And of course, where we'd like you to go, as those of you I'm sure are very mature organizations or even partially mature organizations, is to use Project Server. Now, we're not just tracking things that we've agreed, we're using Project Server as a way of controlling which things that we're going to do. We're going to use the demand management capability of Project Server to take control. And this allows us to decide which of these requests we're going to execute and give ourselves a very good overview of everything that's going on. This is the standard marketing slide. You've probably seen this 1,000 times before. And basically what we're saying here is that you take SharePoint, you take all the capabilities of SharePoint, we can use Project Professional to sync to SharePoint, but then we can take it to the next level and do all these additional capabilities when you add in the Project Server functions over the top of the SharePoint functions. And of course, we have integration with all the tooling that you'd expect to, which does cut off slightly at the bottom of the screen there. Okay, let's just move that onto that slide. So what you're going to get a link to, and what I'm going to show you shortly, is the, we call it the SharePoint Lifecycle Management Solution. The link to the artifacts are on the, both on TechNet and on the developer sites. It comes with WSPs and graphics and a series of instructions that tell you how to configure it. So if you guys are new to project, or Project Server, shall I say, and want to know how do we build an application, this is a great way of having a first introduction to the world of the Project Server. Very, very straightforward. But also we give a white paper that shows why doing this is a good thing. And as I said, we've got the step-by-step guidance of how to do it. We also provide, for you who want to play with it, some data that you can import to show how it works. It's very straightforward. To say it's straightforward is an understatement because I'm no developer, but I actually have built this using the artifacts myself. My biggest problem doing it were my fat fingers. I'm not the world's greatest typist. So for people who want to understand what you can do, it's a great way to get started. So those of you who are customers in the room, you can do it yourself, or you can engage with one of our enterprise project management partners, or if you're a partner and you want to start to get to understand what the EPM platform can do, it's a great starting place. And it's available now. You will get this deck, and the link through to it is on the deck. As we'll see as we move into the live demo of it, it has a 5-stage solution like LifeCycle, and we can see it through here where we basically start a proposal for a change. We then, at that point, we just give it a name and we describe what it is. We don't want any other information. If it gets through the first approval cycle, then we start to ask for more information about it. How much is it going to cost us? What sort of risk are we going to take? How does it fit in with our overall priorities? If then it then becomes part of a series of projects that now have to be chosen, which is what we go through here with the project selection, and the way we do that is use the portfolio management tooling which is built into Project Server, and it allows us to compare our projects to each other, to stack rank them, and to see which ones we wish to go ahead with. Once we've selected the ones that we wish to execute, then we go through to the plan and manage stage, and this is simply assigning resources to a team if we need a team, and making sure that all the steps that we need to do in the project are properly described. And at the very end, we have a simple form where we ask the users to respond with how they feel about our execution of this particular project. Okay, So I suspect I need to push the button at this point in time. Of course, Mons, your screen is now locked. So brilliant. Thank you, sir. Okay. It looks like SharePoint. It should look like SharePoint. It's built on SharePoint. It uses SharePoint as, many of the capabilities within Project Server use SharePoint. This is a vanilla deployment that you're looking at. Of course, you can customize it to some extent to meet your corporate requirements. We have Project Center. Project Center is a list of all the projects, or some of the projects that we wish to use. And this is a list that is very simply configured, and we can effectively choose, we can preset a whole bunch of different lists based upon various criteria. We can choose which fields we want to include, and those are all pre-built. It's really up to us to decide how we want to do it. Very, very straightforward. It is most of the stuff you're looking at is going to be pure configuration. There's not even any customization in it. When we want to start a project, and we're starting within Project Center, but we don't have to, we've essentially got 3 different ways of doing it. We can actually start within the project client and save it onto the project server. We can go to a task list on the SharePoint and then create some structure with that and then import it. But in this case, we have some automation, and we call those enterprise project templates. And it allows us to basically define the workflow, define the forms that we wish to use to capture information, the validation, and trigger off some other activities at the same time. So when I start this off, as I said to you before, at the moment all I'm asking for is a name and a description. Nothing else. So we'll call this the Acme project because that will come up the top of the list. And of course I'm not using, let's be careful. Okay. Now what you're going to see is there's a whole bunch of stuff going off in the right hand side there, because it's doing a number of things at this point in time. As I say that, we're triggering off some workflow, and the workflow is going to do essentially 3 things. Within that template is a project plan, a classic project plan that most of you have seen, an MPP type file. And it's taking the tasks from that MPP file and it's placing them into the SQL database that is connected to this project server. So it's taking it from a sort of freestanding project and making it into an enterprise project. Also, it's kicking off the creation of a website, a SharePoint site, to store all the content associated with this project, because we want to keep all the content together. And as you can see, it might take a few seconds, so I'm not going to go to it quite yet, but we have a link here that allows us to go straight through to the project site. And the other thing is it's moved the workflow on because I've already done it now. So I've done the initial proposal. I'm now at a gateway stage, which is somebody needs to approve this before it can actually move on. And if I look down here, we can see that we're waiting now for somebody to say, yeah, okay, go ahead. So what we'll do is we will close that. Just let it do that. If I go to workflow approvals, I'm logged in as administrator here, and I'm going to go to a list that's going to show me everything that is waiting to be approved. There we go. And I know what I haven't done. I need to submit it, which I haven't done. There it is. And if I now edit and submit, there we go. We can automate this for when we've completed it, but because this is a very straightforward one, we've manually done it. Okay, so it's telling me, well, you can't submit it yet because you haven't completed all the parts. Because I'm now at the initial requirements, I've taken it through that first step. It's saying, well, over here now, you've got some additional information you need to collect. So let's just collect that information. So it's saying, okay, how much is it going to cost? So we'll say that's going to be other people's keyboards. Let's put in, say, 50 man days worth of effort. We could put in some additional description. We can now choose, you can see the standard red asterisks mandatory fields in here. So we'll say it's high risk, and we've pre-built, and this is all these things are part of the artifacts that we give you. So we've going to select the sorts of project we're doing. I won't actually. I need to just close that. So that's one thing I've done. I've got two forms I need to fill in, which the other one is the strategic impact. So we'll go back to that project. Going into the strategic impact. Now, in this particular case, we've set a whole bunch of business objectives that we have for our SharePoints. So, well, some of them are business, some of them are technical. These are down to you. These are very simple to set up. Actually thinking about how you measure them is the hardest piece. Setting these up is really simple, but getting the organization to agree with this is very important. The other thing that you have to know is that the thing that we don't tell the people when they're filling this in is what the relative importance is, because if you did that, you would mark your projects highly in the area that are most important to the business. So I'll just mark that one as moderate, moderate, stream, stream, low, none. Then we'll save that. Now I can submit it. Close that. Just wait for it to do that. So what we've done is at this stage of the project, we've now demanded that we put in 2 sets of information. It could be 2 sets, it could be 10 sets. It's up to you. Very, very simple to set up, very easy. Again, all the step-by-step guidance should give you that information. Did the close? Should go back to the... Are you going to close for me? Close, check in, close, close, close. You could be right. Thank you very much. I thought I clicked everything, but obviously I hadn't. Very good. Let's do the save and the submit. always don't panic when doing presentations. Okay, so these two have shown as being complete. The schedule, and there is a schedule behind here, is basically showing that there's nothing in there that's mandatory. There is a schedule, there is a sample schedule that we built as part of the demo. And here it is. And of course, when we get into the planning stage, what we would probably do is build this out into more detail, assign the task to individuals. And this can be easily customized. But the other thing that's really important to note, those of you who haven't seen this, is that we now have the ability to do some basic changes to our schedules without using the project's professional client. So I can do things like change the durations, assign basic task information. If you want to do sophisticated project planning with some of the more sophisticated concepts, then you still need a project professional client, but for simple things, this is good enough. Now hopefully, I can go back to, if I can close that. There we go. If I go now back to my approvals that I was looking at before and it wasn't there. Go to all tasks. There's my Acme project. And I can edit that, approve it. And this is using the standard workflow and our standard objects. If I go back to my project center now, look at Acme. With a bit of luck, it's now moved on to the project selection stage. So because I've moved it on, it's allowed me to, because I completed those documents, it's allowed me to move the status on. Right, I'm just conscious of time and I want to keep moving at a fairly rapid state. I'm just going to show you that it's created as part of when I created the project in the first place, it created a SharePoint site to go with it. So there's places, again, all of this is in the documentation we give you. And of course, how you want your site to look. This is absolutely as standard as possible. Well, not quite standard. We add in things like issues and risks and various other things that you might want to have in a project. Okay. The next thing that is worthwhile having a look at is our backlog of projects. So I'm going to go straight to the portfolio analysis. And what we can see here is that we have actually, if we go to that, we have the ability to choose how we're going to rank our projects together. And we can basically set up various models. We can do multiple models that allow us to basically say, okay, which projects are we going to include in here? So I'm going to add in my Acme project. And let's add in, say, there's one at the bottom called the Zohar project. And we'll add that one in as well. So I've got 6 projects in here at the moment. I can choose how I want to review these based on the cost or benefit or something else like that. And what this system will do, if I do it properly, is as I move through the process, oh dear. Okay, go back, do a new one. So we'll do Acme. We'll simply select all the projects and we will move on. Okay, so what it's showing me, and you can, as you saw before, you can choose some or all of the projects, is how they've scored against those priorities. So if you've got a number of projects in your backlog, you can basically review how your individuals have scored them and say, well, I don't believe that this one should be moderate. I think actually this should be low because they've just overcooked it. What it will then do is look at the relative priorities that we've set up of the different projects, of the different alignments, and look at the relative importance, and therefore it will then rank the projects by their importance to the business. And so what we've got now is the 24 projects ranked by their importance to the business. And as we move on, it then shows me, okay, well, if you were to do all 24 projects, it'll cost you 1.4 million, but it'll deliver you 100% of the value. But my budget this year isn't 1.4 million. We'll say my budget is, say, I don't know, 750-ish. $780. If I recalculate that, what it's going to do is try and do a best fit. How do I get the best value out of my projects? And what it's trying to do is stay on this line, and it's saying, well, out of my 24 projects, if you give me 730,000, I actually can do 21 projects and deliver you almost 90% of the value. And what we can see as we go through our list for the selected and the unselected projects is that some get moved out. But I might say that I really need to do this particular project, and I can actually come in here and force it in and then recalculate. And what will happen is that it's going to move out a number of projects. It's dropped down to 17 now, and only 74% of the value. And we can see that down the bottom of the list, there's a whole bunch of projects that moved out. Now, eventually, you'll do multiple scenarios of this, and you'll get down to the projects that you wish to do, and then you'll commit them, and that will move them on to the next phase of the workflow. So let's have a look a little bit about how this actually hangs together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto the site settings. And what we can see here in the workflow, in this particular environment, the project workflow, we have the dynamic workflow. And this is one that we ship and we give to you as part of that link. And then as I move down to the workflow settings, and if we look at this particular one that we are using, here we can see the way it's been configured, the things that we need to set up, etc., etc. And as I go to the next stage, this is where we effectively build in those workflow steps, and we link those through to the various web project detail pages and the various parts associated with it. And you can see here there's various things that this workflow carries with it, messages. We can choose various things, whether I said to you, we can either manually do the submit or force a submit. We can do various things, whether we want to see the commit happen in the portfolio. Moving down. Does it need to be approved to move on to the next step? Who does the approval? And this is all stuff that we ship as part of the artifacts associated with it. Do we send an email notification that it's got there? The great thing about this is that the instructions are step by step, and for those of you who are experienced around SharePoint development, will have no problems getting to understand what's going on whatsoever. If I look over here at the server settings, we can see over here the different enterprise project types that we were talking about previously. There's that SharePoint enhancement. Fairly straightforward. Tells us what workflow we're going to associate it with. And one of the things that's very clear is that we can have different workflows, different projects, different workflows, different approval cycles. It's really down to you how sophisticated you want to make this. Tells us where we want to start. And so on and so forth through the various steps. Okay, So I'm just going to switch back to my screen. There we go. So, what does it do? It offers you a framework, pre-built. It allows you to use the portfolio tool that you saw I used to use, and I only took you very, very briefly through it. I could spend an hour just on the portfolio tool itself, because it's not just that bit of selecting, but it's how you decide what the weightings are going to be. Very straightforward to do, and you can actually build up programs. You can link projects to each other before you even start that process. So you can say that if I'm doing project A, I'm not going to do project B, but I must do project C. So you can actually build relationships up between projects as well, because often you want to break things down. It gives you the tooling. As I said before, it gives you the artifacts and the white papers associated with it. And it also gives you examples of those sorts of business drivers that we saw when we align the projects to our business objectives. But again, these are all samples for you to tune to your specific requirements. And we offer, there's a project plan template. You saw the project plan very briefly. And also the lookup tables. We provide both the ability to build this from scratch, step by step, or you can actually, we give you some databases that you can import in and have essentially an almost pre-built version right from the word go. And the way we do that is through this PWA instance. So effectively, you simply attach the databases to a project server, and you're up and running to all intents and purposes. You saw the workflow part. This is a WSP that's shipped, plus we ship the visualization. The visualization that we use is different. Different partners have their own visualizations. This is one we ship. We don't actually ship one out of the box with Project Server. Normally we'd expect you to build them yourselves, but we give you this one as part of the process. There is a lot of stuff around Project Server. But getting started isn't complex. It looks complex, but it isn't really. And this white paper is a really great way of just getting your feet under the table. So you can do that. I'm just going to go past this slide to this stuff here. I'll go back to those other slides. Those of you who are, how many partners do we have in the room? Okay. We are running training, I know this is a very short notice, next week in Shista. And if you email Mons, who you saw up here, he's at the back of the room, and there are some spare spaces on that training if you'd like to come on it. For those of you who can't do it so quickly, this is again aimed at partners, I have to say. We're also running a much more detailed academy where we're actually teaching people about project management as a concept, as well as using our technology in detail. And this is going to be a 9-month, it's not a 9-month course. You're not away for 9 months doing it. It's not that bad. It's about 10 days or 12 days over a 9-month period. There'll be a boot camp, a mid-year camp, and then a graduation with some bits and pieces in between. But it's really designed to take people who know nothing about project to a more sophisticated use. If you want to see some samples of this in action, Mons has got a, again, if you follow the link that's going to be in the presentation, he's set up a YouTube channel where he's demonstrating various aspects of project server and project clients in Swedish. I hasten to point that out. The training next week in Schista will be in English, mainly because the English trainer doesn't speak any Swedish. It's not me, I hasten to point out. Oh, we got the right page. Yeah, there we go. So, what we see here are two worlds colliding to some extent. The fact that SharePoint is successful means that you probably have a problem controlling all this stuff. Project Server is a tool, it's not the tool, it is a tool to help you take control of this from a business perspective. If you're ready to do this, it's a great way of getting it on board. I would love all of you to go away and start doing this straight away, but some of you won't be ready. Decide whether you are. If you think you are, just get your hands dirty with it. I'm not saying you should move it into production straight away, but it's really simple. We've got some demo virtual machines that you can load up just to get a handle on what you need to do. If you're happy with that, obviously depending on your licensing position with Microsoft, some of you will be able to set up an evaluation without any additional cost whatsoever, but that depends on what your licensing model is. If you go onto microsoft.com/project, especially if you go to the learning section, there is a huge amount of videos and other training materials which we give away for free. And they are fantastic. And we actually we talk about them as being entry level, but some of them are really sophisticated. So, I do recommend that you go and have a look at that. Some of you don't want to do that. You don't want to get your hands dirty. Well, again, reach out to the partner community. They're great. We've got some fantastic skills here in Sweden, and they're definitely worthwhile engaging with. So with that, and with 3 minutes to go, Mons, if you want to come up here. My partner in crime, who did such a magnificent job of getting his machine set up. Thank you very much. We'd love to take any questions and answers that you would do, any quick Q&A, and you can do them in English, or if you fancy, you can do them in Swedish as well. So, who's going to be the first person to ask questions? Sir? Yes, you will get a link to all the slides after the event. Absolutely. You don't get the machine to go crash as well at the same time. That's not added extra.
It looked fine from the audience.
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you see what was going on here, you'd have felt sick. You'd have felt sick. Come on, some more questions. Don't be reticent Swedes. Be aggressive Swedes. I know you're all Vikings at heart. Come on. No? No more questions?
How much time do you expect it takes for the beginner to understand and really make use of it?
Well, there's two aspects of that. How long does it take to build that, what you just saw? Okay, the demo. I said, I'm not a developer. I really am not a developer. I used to do COBOL years ago, but I stopped because I was crap. Excuse me. I built that in half a day. Exactly what you saw there. And I'm no good. So somebody who has got decent SharePoint skills will be able to do that in half a day without difficulty. However, it isn't just as simple as building the application. You've got to think about how you're going to use it in your organization. Read the white paper. The white paper will help you to explain to your colleagues what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. So there's enormous value in that white paper. Okay. So, my name is Ian White. I'd like to thank you very much. If you liked the event, put a high score. If you didn't like the event, my name is Mons Barkland, and put a low score. Thank you very much.